Hey everyone, back for another video. So in this first clip, I'm just re-showing the clip that I showed in my last video, where I had drawn a kind of a sculpture that I did with another sculpture, which I actually made. So I thought that this one that is on the screen now would be another project that I could dive into, and it would work like the twin of the other sculpture I did many years ago. Anyway, so this video is basically going to show some ways that I kind of gain inspiration for some of the sculptures that I do. Enjoy. Where do I get inspiration from? Well, the honest answer is everywhere. You know, like most people, you're going to get it from your life experiences, memories, feelings, observations, anything. But the clips that you are seeing on the screen now are from a place called Farmyard Nurseries, which is basically a garden centre. So if I haven't mentioned it before, I live in West Wales, in the countryside, and one of our nearest towns is a place called Llandyssil, and they have a lovely nursery called Farmyard Nurseries. And it's amazing. It was established like in 1984, which is actually the year I was born, and it's not that well. It is big for a garden centre, but the land that it covers is only around 3 acres. But they have like 50 polytunnels in this place. It's unbelievable. Like any kind of plant you can imagine. Well, not any kind of plant, but they've got like about 2,000 different varieties of plants. And God, it was just really. I loved it. I loved walking around. It was really inspiring. It was just kind of got the juices flowing in terms of like creativity, and I was just kind of excited to walk around. I'd been here before with my wife, who's been to this place loads of times, and she had mentioned that she had gone to a kind of like secluded garden area within the actual grounds. So we had decided to kind of, you know, have a bit of a wander around, have a bit of a walk, and see what we come across. What I like about going to see nature or observing nature is that I think that there are certain kind of shapes and stuff that I see in nature which I've kind of incorporated into the kind of sculptures that I do. They're very kind of odd shapes when you look at it from a purely composition point of view. So I do feel like I am inspired a lot by nature, and then I'll kind of do what I feel in the moment and be inspired in the moment by what I'm doing and different thoughts that kind of come into my head. So these were just kind of random things that I was seeing around there. I think this massive plant is called a gunnera, and it is huge. Like you'll see my hand in a minute. These leaves are massive, and apparently it's an invasive plant. Like you can't plant them in the UK. This was really nice to see. It was actually kind of like this kind of hanging over stuff is willow, and willow is apparently one of those plants where you can literally just take a cutting off a willow, stick it in the ground, and it will grow, which is really good. But they had made this kind of enclosed little area. We thought that on the land that we've got here, we could potentially do something like that. But I'm diverting away from the point. What I wanted to do is, as I continue showing this footage, I wanted to do like a side by side of like kind of drawing a different sculpture that I wanted to do, kind of evolving the drawing that you saw at the beginning of this video. So let's see how it goes. Decisions. Fine, let's go this way. So I think one of the things I wanted to talk about in regards to inspiration is that I kind of feel like I am inspired by what I think is cool. And what I mean by that is, more often than not, when I'm working on a sculpture, when I'm creating it in the moment, my thought process is always governed by what I think looks good, you know, and what I ultimately create, you know, the shapes that I create, how I stick everything together, what the outcome is based on what I think is cool. And what I mean by cool is probably, you know, what I think is aesthetically pleasing, or I feel like it makes a good shape. or it kind of, if you look at a sculpture, if you look at the clay itself, there is an element of, that clay wants to be shaped into something. The shape already exists, so to speak. And what you're doing is you're just helping it, you're just moving the clay until it makes that shape. One of the reasons why I wanted to show the time lapse of me doing the drawing of the sculpture on the right is to kind of give you my thought process when I'm creating. Ultimately, one of my goals and my thought process around the drawing and what I would eventually do when I create this sculpture is actually just filling space. If I was to kind of cut the drawing up into sections and pieces, imagine there's four sections of that drawing that I'm doing. What I'll try to do is kind of, I guess, create some kind of equilibrium within that shape. I'll have the basic structure, which is what you can see there, and I'm kind of drawing it as a smaller version there on the left, so you know what the basic structure is. And then I'll try and create some kind of equilibrium and balance within that. How can I have other shapes within that wider shape that will either look aesthetically pleasing or will kind of create a balance in a different way? If you imagine that bit towards the left, which is kind of poking upwards, imagine if that was one piece of slab at the front that kind of points to the bottom on the right and then points to the bottom on the left, which you can see. How can I create space within that, or how can I create some kind of structure or texture within that makes it look aesthetically pleasing? And what is interesting is that I will actually think about this type of stuff when I'm kind of walking around somewhere like, Farmyard Nurseries or a garden centre, or if I'm on the beach and I see like a sunset. Like one of this shape that you can see now definitely inspired what you saw previously in that time lapse. The shape is like something that's kind of quintessential for me. So when I was walking past this and I saw it, this is a very me thing to make. Like in the sense that I would make a sculpture based on this shape. I would be inspired by this shape, and I will just stare at it for God knows how long, and then I'll kind of take a mental note, and then I'll kind of move on. Which is what happens. What you saw previously as well, I kind of walked past an Acer tree, and I love Acer trees. My wife loves buying trees and plants to plant in our land. And one thing I say is that make sure you buy Acers because I love them. What you are about to see now was a definite happy surprise for me. It was like this small little kind of cottagey house. Like, look at that. This is just randomly something that we came across within this 3-acre land garden centre. I don't know what it is, but maybe the owners of it had built this some time ago. I think it's made out of like straw bales or some kind of structure. You can see all that moss on the side of one of the roofs. But look at it. It is just, that is something that I would be inspired by. Like, it's got so many kind of like weird, odd shapes. And I think that's maybe something that I would describe some of my sculptures to have, is like these kind of weird, obscure shapes. It doesn't really kind of have any rhyme or reason. I guess that's what you would classify as, being abstract. I guess I'm an abstract ceramicist. I like the weird stuff. I like the weird shapes. It kind of makes sense to me in a way. I hope that there's a symmetry and a sentimentality to it which I bring in the work, and hopefully I can kind of develop that. I'm really mindful of it. But having said that, it's not just about being weird and obscure. There is a balance that I'm trying to create within the shapes themselves. It's not random. What I'm also mindful of is how I can make my work more and more obscure and more weird. What I mean by that is sometimes I feel like if I think of a weird idea, the conviction to actually do it is what excites me. Like, oh, that's a crazy idea. I wonder if I can make that happen. And the more obscure it is, then it just kind of excites me more and more as an artist. So going back to this drawing and matching it with what I can see. So I guess these kind of holes bits that I'm drawing now on the right, one of the things that inspire that is kind of these deep cavities that I can see in these trunks. So this is obviously old rotted tree trunks that have fallen over, and this is like the root system, I think, and the trunks that have been, you know, weathered down by nature, insects or whatever. And all those kind of deep cavities are what I'm kind of shading out in the clay piece that I'm drawing, the sculpture that I'm drawing on the right. And again, this is one of those moments where I've just been walking around the site, and I will stop and I will just kind of like hone in on these shapes. I'll just kind of make a mental note of it, and this is what is inspiring me. This is kind of giving me the ideas. So the drawing that you're seeing is something that I did later on that day, and what I was thinking about was some of these shapes, you know, and I went to my phone, had a look back at the footage, and just kind of thought about it in a bit more depth, you know, kind of sitting with the shapes. It sounds odd again, but that's kind of what I'm doing. That's exactly what I'm doing. You know, sometimes when you're inspired by something, you're just kind of soaking in its energy, if that's the right word, or you're soaking up what it's giving you. You know, if you feel inspired, you're going to stay in that place that keeps you inspired. You're not going to be like, oh, I'm inspired, I'm just going to bugger off now. You're not going to do that. But anyway, look at that. Look at that. Those parts. Unfortunately, we weren't able to walk through that. But just look at that. It was just amazing to see this little pond lake thing here. By this point, I had completely forgotten about the fact that I'm actually in a garden centre. You wouldn't believe it. You know, this was all kind of in enclosed area. It was all these kind of paths within this kind of, it felt like a deep forest, even though it was very small. But I just felt like this would be one of those areas where I could spend hours just kind of wandering around these paths and all these little dark areas and nooks and crannies of nature. It was such a brilliant place to be. But anyways, hope you enjoyed that. Just wanted to kind of give you a bit of insight into what I do to get inspired. This is probably just one of many things that I do. I am literally inspired by anything. I think the biggest inspiration for me is just getting myself in the mindset of I want to create, and I don't always get those moments. So this was just one of those moments, and there's nothing like being out in nature to kind of get those creative juices flowing. You know, nothing's greater than it. You know, it's just basically time and space, isn't it? And yeah, so the next step will be that I'm going to be creating this piece, hopefully when I get a bit of time. I don't think it's going to be something that I can get done in a day. That's the thing. It might take me a bit of time to actually get this done. But that will probably be in the next video, hopefully, within the next couple of weeks. Anyway, hope you enjoy. See you soon. Before I go, there's nothing like being inspired by nature's friends. And I met a friend of mine, look at him. He is living his best life.